In this scorched corner of the world, a silent war rages, not of men, but of spirits. The blinding sun of the Chihuahua Desert is a cruel master, exposing every sin, every scar, and every shard of rot in a man's soul. But even this white-hot light must eventually bow. As the sun dips behind the jagged limestone cathedrals, the shadows don't just grow, they hunt. The darkness here is a living thing, an ancient weight that can only follow the faded light, creeping into the crevices where hope used to sit. It waits for the light to fail, for the heat to bleed out of the earth, so it can claim what's left of the broken. 1858. Just south of the United States border in the Chihuahua Desert, the dust from the hanging of Jed Cooper had barely settled across the border. Against a low, crumbling adobe wall, 2 out of a 9-man lynching posse, Reno and Miller, slumped in the meager shade. Dust coated their eyebrows and the creases of their mouths, making them look like statues carved from the very silt they sat upon.
How long are we gonna sit in this hellhole, Miller? The marshal ain't gonna cross the border. You didn't see his eyes, Reno. That man don't care about borders. He's a ghost with a badge.
They were laying low, but the isolation was a slow rot. A young Mexican woman named Elena approached them.
As long as we're here, we might as well make ourselves at home.
He doesn't look at her like a person. He looks at her like property. Reno and Miller thought the Rio Grande was a finish line, a watery veil that would wash away the blood of Jed Cooper. They were wrong. They didn't find redemption in the dust. They only found a place to hide their shame. Mateo fired a stolen 6-shooter and shattered a hanging clay pot 20 yards away, disintegrated into red shards. Deep within the limestone crevices and the shifting silt, these killers took root like invasive weeds, siring a legacy they were too cowardly to lead and too broken to love. To the world, they were mistakes, the Los Fantasmas of the scrub. But sitting around that fire, the 13 shadows became a pack. They took the name the world spat at them and wore it like iron plate. When that white-hot metal hissed against their skin, they weren't just marking flesh. They were severing the last ties to the fathers who abandoned them. They became a brotherhood of the scarred, bound by a blood oath to hunt the Cooper name until the line is finally severed. The desert is a hungry place, even for a bastard. As the fire crackles and sparks vanish into the infinite blackness, a heavy realization settles over the circle. One brother is missing, swallowed by the same shifting sands that birthed them. In this land of ghosts, the silence is never just silence. It's a warning that the desert is finally ready to harvest what it has waited a decade to claim. The darkness doesn't just watch, it waits for the machines of the light to falter. When the iron horse screeched to a halt under the bruised indigo sky, it wasn't just a train being stopped. It was a puncture in the vein of a world that tried to forget us. As the steam hissed and faded into the cooling desert air, the 13 moved like silhouettes cast by a dying sun, draped in stolen Union overcoats that smelled of cedar and old blood. Inside the luxury cars, the air was thick with the scent of fear and expensive wax. We watched as men of God and men of law offered up their paper and their prayers, neither of which hold value in the limestone crevices of the Chihuahua. Santiago draped pearls over knuckles calloused by the desert's kiln, while Joaquin tossed aside silver pocket watches as if they were common grit. We took their gold, but more importantly, we took their peace. To them, the railroad represents progress, a line of steel cutting through the dirt. To us, it is a reminder of the heritage we were left, the rusted steel of fathers who were too cowardly to stay, and the shadow of the nooses they narrowly escaped. Every jewel box emptied and every ledger burned is a message sent back to the sun-drenched offices of Fort Grant. The ripples of Jed Cooper's hanging have finally reached the shore. The 13 bastards evolved to survive in the Mexican Chihuahua desert of 1890. Eventually, the tracks of the Chihuahua Express were laid right through their territory. The prize was too great to be ignored. The men were getting wealthy from the wrath of their vengeance. After over a dozen train robberies, the Chihuahua Express stopped running through the desert. The men grew bored, and with the extra time on their hands, and with the extra U.S. notes to burn, they discussed going north for supplies, until they were reminded of the name Miller. The hideaway of the 13 bastards was a ghost of a Spanish hacienda north of the village. Inside the ruins, the air was thick with the scent of heavy wax candles and the flickering orange glow of a massive stone hearth that roared with mountain oak. The floor was a chaotic sea of velvet-lined jewelry boxes, silk dresses spilling from trunks, and piles of silver plate. The 13 moved through the loot like scavengers in a cathedral, wearing stolen, high-collared Union Army overcoats, their spurs jingling a predatory song. Mateo, now 30, and carrying a face mapped with scars, sat at a heavy oak table. He was meticulously cleaning a gold-plated Smith & Wesson, the oil glistening on his dark fingers. Joaquin, leaner and more cynical with age, held up a delicate silver pocket watch. He snapped it open, the chime tiny and pathetic in the cavernous room. The Thaddeus, with eternal love, Philadelphia, 1885. Santiago, the youngest and most flamboyant, draped a string of pearls over his grimy, calloused knuckles. They cried when we stopped the iron horse, he said, admiring the luster. The women prayed to a god who wasn't there, and the men offered us paper. Their paper is worthless here, Mateo said without looking up. Their names hold even less value. Joaquin pulled a leather-bound journal from a satchel. Listen to this one, the Reverend William Miller. The room went tomb silent. The name Miller hung in the air like a ghost. They think because they built a railroad, they own the dirt. They think because they have a judge in Fort Grant, they have justice. They live in the sun, Mateo growled, his voice vibrating with a decade of fermented rage. We were born in the shadow of their turned-up nooses. They sired, God help us, Elias muttered. We're going to burn Fort Grant to the dirt.
They should be back soon before it gets too late.
At daybreak, the sky was a bruised purple bleeding into pale gold. The air was thick with wood smoke and the sharp, alkaline scent of horse sweat. The 13 moved with military precision, cinching saddles and checking cinches in a silent, practiced dance. Vámonos! Let's go, he commanded. By high noon, the sun was a hammer. They rode through a narrow trail flanked by limestone bluffs that looked like bleached ribs. Mateo raised a hand, and the line halted instantly. He pointed upward. Vultures. On a crumbling bluff above, a glint of sunlight hit a rifle barrel. A voice drifted down, the leader of a band of ragged thieves.
The gold and the horses, and maybe we let you crawl back to the village!
Joaquin's hand hovered over his holster, a cruel smile touching his lips. You picked the wrong morning to be hungry, my friend.
Shoot them!
The bluff erupted, but the 13 were not travelers. They were a war party.
Open fire!
The canyon echoed with the booming cracks of Winchesters and the sharp, rhythmic bark of Colt Peacemaker. The silence returns, heavier than before. Smoke drifts lazily up the canyon walls. Bodies lie broken in the dirt at the base of the bluff. The 13 haven't even broken a sweat. The silence returned, heavier and more suffocating than before. Smoke from the brief skirmish drifted lazily up the canyon walls, curling like gray ribbons against the ancient limestone. Bodies lay broken and twisted in the dirt, their blood already being claimed by the thirsty desert sand. The men in a grim procession, their silhouettes stretching long, dark, and predatory toward the Rio Grande, as the sun began its final descent behind a distant desert ridge. The 13 halted in a dry riverbed, a jagged scar in the landscape, sheltered by a stand of twisted, skeletal mesquite trees. Their routine was seamless, a silent choreography born of 1,000 nights on the trail. Two of the men, carrying long rifles across their backs, slipped silently into the brush like mountain lions, intent on finding dinner among the jackrabbits and rattlesnakes that stirred in the dusk. Only one of the men returned a short time later, carrying 4 large desert jackrabbits. The men confused why the 2 men did not return together. Miguel knelt behind the skeletal remains of a turned-over stagecoach, his body as motionless as the ancient rocks surrounding him. He did not make a sound, his attention laser-focused on the shimmering distance. He heard a posse of at least 20 men riding north about 5 minutes ago. They were cutting through that canyon, heading straight towards Fort Grant. Mateo and Miguel decided to leave early to cut off the posse by taking the Flaca Pass. The circle fell into a brief, companionable silence, the heat of the tin cups seeping into their calloused palms. They were a brotherhood of the broken, held together by the bitter taste of the morning's black coffee and the shared weight of the brand on their arms. The ride toward the roundabout Flaca Pass was a descent into a world of stone and silence. The ground beneath the horses' hooves changed from soft silt to treacherous, shifting shale. Every step produced a rhythmic clack slide, a sound that seemed to echo for miles in the pre-dawn stillness. To their left, the canyon wall rose up like a monolithic fortress, its surface scarred by centuries of wind and water. To their right, a sheer drop into a darkness so profound it felt like the end of the world.
Enjoy the journey. The views and narratives presented in this video and across this channel are works of fiction and are intended purely as an exploration of an alternate reality. Nothing shared here is presented as fact, nor is it meant to predict the future or dictate your personal beliefs. We encourage all viewers to use their own critical reasoning to form their opinions.